Secretary please call the roll?
Good morning. Let the record reflect Commissioners Kim, Madison, and Saltzman are present, and we have a quorum. Number 1 on our agenda is commission comments.
Good morning. The first thing that I'd like to do is, obviously, the President of the Commission, Commissioner Soboroff, is not here today, and so I'm, the presiding officer. So I'd like to call for a moment of silence as we regret to announce the death of Police Officer 2+2, Christopher A. Cortijo, who passed away Wednesday, April 9th in Mission Hills, California. Officer Cortijo was born on August 13th, 1962 in Torrance, California, and he was appointed to the department on July 27th, 1987. Officer Cortijo was last assigned to Valley Traffic Division. He's survived by his son, Jonathan, domestic partner, Lillian, stepdaughters, Christina and Jacqueline, and his brother, John. His service will be next Tuesday at the Cathedral of Our Lady of the Angels on Temple Street at 9 a.m. And now, could we please bow our heads, a moment of silence for Officer Cortijo. Thank you. Madam Secretary, first agenda item.
Number 1 on the agenda is commission comments.
Thank you. I do have one comment this morning. Thank you very much. I just want to thank Captain Zarconi and Hollywood and everyone under his command. I spent Friday evening and most of Saturday morning on a ride along with Hollywood Vice, and a lot of attention from many folks in the department. I appreciate it very much. I cannot remember the last time I was awake at 4 in the morning, but I was, and it was a good experience for me. And as always, I was impressed with the professionalism of all the officers and command officers that I saw and observed. And I appreciate the extra effort they put in to allow me to do that. So, thank you.
Commissioner? Nothing.
Item number 2 on the agenda, the report of the Chief of Police, Chief Beck.
Good morning, Commissioners, and thank you much for recognizing Chris Cortijo. His passing has affected all of us. It's an unbelievable irony that a man who spent his adult life protecting the people of Los Angeles from those who drive under the influence was killed by one of those same people. And I was briefed in total on the case as it is progressing yesterday. I'm very pleased at the progress. Was briefed by the district attorney, who was handling the prosecutions, and am very hopeful that we will get some measure of justice. So thank you for your recognition. Under my normal discussion of crime, homicides are down 15% in the city as compared to last year, 29% as compared to 2012. We're on track to have a remarkable year as far as our homicide reduction strategies go. Rapes are down in total, both the categories as they've been newly construed by the FBI. In total, about 0.5%. Robberies are down 8.5%, and aggravated assaults are down 2%. Total violent crime is down 5%, a little over 5%, compared to 13, and almost 17% compared to 12. Property crime is down significantly across the board, except for in the category of personal theft, where they're up very slightly at 0.3%. Total property crime is down in the city, the aggregate of 10.3%, and that gives us a total Part 1 crime reduction this year as compared to last of 9.5%, and as compared to 2012, 13.3%. Shootings, incidents of shootings are down throughout the city. Every one of the 4 bureaus is experiencing a reduction in Part 1 crime, so it's a citywide trend. West Bureau is having is closest to the break-even point with a minus 1.5% reduction, and South Bureau has the greatest reduction at 14.2%. Officer-involved shootings, we've had 8 so far this year as compared to 11 last year. Traffic collisions, in total, citywide traffic collisions are up 0.8%. That's a little over 100 total collisions. Driving under the influence related collisions are down 12.8%. Hit and runs are down in total 8.3%. Motor vehicle versus pedestrian accidents are up 4%, and bicycle-involved accidents are down 2.9%. We have 9,906 sworn personnel on payroll, 267 Level 1 reserves, 21 Level 2s, 189 Level 3s, 371 specialist volunteers, 38 chaplains, 2,789 civilian personnel, 558 civilian vacancies, and 4,630 cadets in our program. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Item number 3 on the agenda, the report of the Executive Director, Mr. Tiefenk.
Good morning, Madam Vice President, members of the Commission. A very brief item, as you mentioned, the funeral for Officer Cortillo is next Tuesday at 9 a.m. There will be no Commission meeting next Tuesday. We will cancel that meeting so the Commissioners can attend the funeral. The next regular Commission meeting after today will be on the 29th of April. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Item number 4, the report of the Inspector General, Mr. Bustamante.
Thank you, Commissioners. Just a brief update on personnel in my office. We were down several bodies over the last, I'd say, about a year. We're looking to bring on, now we've made offers, and we'll have 3 additional special investigators and 2 auditors coming in and plussing up our staff within the next month or so. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Item number 5 consists of information items and filed items relative to noise variances and special event permits submitted for the period ending April 11th, 2014. Item number 6, presentations. Do we have any presentations?
None today.
Thank you. Item number 7 is consent agenda items. These items are considered to be routine and non-controversial, upon which the board is provided with adequate information for approval without inquiry or discussion. Would a commissioner wish to pull an item as special for discussion from 7A through 7F?
I move approval of items 7A through 7F.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you. We're now on regular agenda items, number 8. Item number 8A is a verbal presentation. Would a commissioner wish to pull item 8B as special for discussion?
Move to approve item 8B.
Second?
Favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. Then we will move to item number 8A. Excuse me. Over here. Department's verbal report and discussion as requested by the Board of Police Commissioners relative to the digital in-car video system audio recording antennas for operations South Bureau and Southeast area.
Madam President, if I could preface the comments of of those reporting for the department. I think the thing that I want to make most clear, and that's why I want to say it myself, is that the department believes wholeheartedly in civilian oversight. I believe in it. The 3 command officers seated in front of you believe in it. It is what has made the department the success that it has been over the last dozen years. I think one of the key issues that we'll talk about is notifications to the commission of an incident that was of great interest to the commission. And the simple answer is this: if the commission believes that it was not notified correctly, then the commission is right. The notifications are designed to give this body the information that it desires. And if we fail to meet that burden, then it's on us, and we will take whatever actions that we need to make sure that there is no reoccurrence.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Madam Vice President, I'm Assistant Chief Earl Paysinger, Director of the Office of Operations for the LAPD. I'm joined today by the Chief of Staff, Deputy Chief Rick Jacobs, and also the Commanding Officer of Operations South Bureau, Deputy Chief Bob Green. What brought us here this morning was a request by the Commission to make this presentation based upon a number of accountability deficiencies that were related to the assignment, tracking, and deployment of digital in-car video in South Bureau. To echo the Chief's point to the question of whether or not we fell short of the mark in ensuring that proper systems were installed and monitored and were in place to accomplish this task of deploying the technology, I think the simple answer to that question is yes. And really, the presence of the three of us, the Director of Operations, the Chief of Staff, and Chief Green, is more than ceremonial or symbolic. I think in many respects, it applies an exclamation point on how important this whole question of digital in-car video and also other accountability technologies are to the department. We are not here this morning to proffer or offer excuses for those missteps, but to provide the Commission with what we discovered, our insight, some resolution strategies we believe that are effective, and frankly, some assurances from me and my colleagues and the rest of the Office of Operations that we will not only learn from these lessons, but also to take the lessons that we have learned to the next step in terms of its launch in Operation Central Bureau, hopefully by the end of this year, and also to install accountability and compliance measures in similar inspections as it relates to body cameras and other accountability technologies. After I conclude my brief remarks, Chief Green will discuss some of the X's and O's of what we identified and the measures that we have taken and we will continue to take in terms of accountability. And after him, Chief Jacobs will briefly discuss his oversight and involvement in terms of the notification piece. Before I move further, I'd just like to really emphasize, if I may, the point that the Chief of Police made in terms of our belief, in terms of my belief. I believe it's important for me to state in a very emphatic way the department strongly believes in the value of the digital in-car system, as well as other technologies. We believe that it's the next logical step in extending the values of community policing that the Chief has talked about time and time again during his administration, and has made it one of his top priorities since the start of that administration. We believe that digital in-car video and the body cameras and other technologies, similar technologies, are effective tools that allow our organization to promote transparency to the public. It's been used effectively, literally hundreds, if perhaps not thousands of times since its launch, both in criminal and in administrative investigations. I believe that it helps validate the officer's work, and it sends a very powerful message to the public about how much the LAPD is committed to our work in a very open and an honest way. Although we were fortunate in May of last year to be dismissed from the consent decree after demonstrating substantial compliance in all, I believe it was 187 provisions, for all practical purposes, the Chief believes and we believe that it's essential that we maintain even today that high watermark and not knowingly take steps backwards and commit the same errors that got us in that position in the first place about 10 years ago. It's our determination, our intention to assertively advance this technology, body cameras, and other similar types of technologies, as we have done, I believe, so effectively with the precision driving campaign that we have been driving for the last year. We're no longer under the umbrella of the consent decree, but it's important for this commission to know and understand that those provisions are as important to us today as they were when we were first deemed to be in compliance by the federal courts. And I'll hold the rest of my comments, and I'll defer at this point to Chief Green.
Morning, Commissioner.
Good morning.
As the commanding officer of Operation South Bureau, I'm ultimately responsible to ensure I provide the leadership and accountability for constitutional policing in South Los Angeles. I've been involved in digital in-car video since the inception and the rollout. I'm a strong believer in the technology, and I believe it'll be the best thing that we have ever done in the way of public trust and raising the standard of law enforcement in Los Angeles. From the onset, I've committed valuable resources to monitoring the implementation. I have 10 people assigned full-time to monitor digital in-car video to make sure it's getting used when it should be within the Bureau. In July of 2013, it was one of our assessments that identified the fact that we had an issue with cradle port antennas being gone. We investigated and conducted an assessment, and that was done in July. We notified the Office of Operations Professional Standards Bureau, and then ultimately, once we determined that we could not conduct any type of sting, we didn't have that technology to do that, we made a full court press at all our commands to the 1,700 officers assigned to South Bureau to make sure they understood the importance of digital in-car video, the importance of the perception of missing antennas, and the fact that if an antenna or any part of the system was tampered with, it was considered very, very serious misconduct. In August, those projects were completed, and we ordered new antennas. Bureau Order number 1 was written. In that Bureau Order, it required start of watch and end of watch inspections of the cradle port antennas, supervisory inspections of field, and notifications in the event any antenna was broken or missing. September 20th, the replacement antennas arrived, and by September 25th, we had gone through the over 400 vehicles assigned to Operation South Bureau and replaced every one of those antennas. That next week, the Bureau Order was distributed to all commands, and we couldn't distribute it before those antennas were replaced because they required the daily inspections. We conducted follow-up assessments to ensure that the checks and balances we put in place have been effective. That first inspection we conducted, we identified one car that did not have an antenna. We determined that vehicle had been in the body shop when the antennas were replaced. The second inspection of the fleet, we identified one antenna that was on the floor of the vehicle. It was replaced, and the last officer to drive that vehicle was given a notice correct deficiencies for failure to inspect that vehicle at end of watch. I have specific numbers of the areas of the antennas that were missing, and at that point, I'm available for any questions.
You know, I'm going to speak to the investigation part and the notification part of this. As Chief Green indicated, we did an investigation into this, but we did not initiate a personnel investigation. That decision was carefully considered at the highest levels. There was discussion over a period of days over that. The discussion also included what strategies would be used if, in fact, we did this, including the use of our Special Operations Division, use of stings, pole cameras, etc. The decision was finally made that the scope of the investigation would preclude us from being able to ID individuals. We had 3+ years of data that we would have to go through, literally thousands and thousands of documents, in excess of 1,500 officers who could be involved in this. So instead of doing that, because of the scope, as Chief Green has indicated, the decision was made to move forward, put everybody on notice immediately, as South Bureau did, of this issue, what the repercussions would be if that was found again, and then have relentless follow-up, which includes, up until today, audits and different things that are put in place by that order. In regards to the notification, that was not done immediately. This is not an intentional act. I can say that from my heart. It's an oversight. As the chief mentioned in his original comments, he's made it very clear from the time he became the chief of police how important civilian oversight is for this department. It's something that I believe in, that I talk to people about myself, as I know everybody else at this table does. I believe we have a very good relationship with the commission through Mr. Tefank, and also with the Inspector General, Mr. Bustamante. We have continual and constant communication with them. And again, this was just an oversight, not an intentional act. Chief Payson?
As we move forward, I think Chief Green has already mentioned the number of inspections that have occurred in Operation South Bureau and that will continue to occur to ensure that there is very tight accountability and compliance with the provisions that have been outlined for the use of digital in-car video. In addition to that, because the digital in-car video technology will now breach the borders at the end of the year into Operation Central Bureau, I've notified the Chief of Police that my office will now take primary lead with the oversight of digital in-car video compliance for the reasons that I talked about. And in anticipation of that, I have already appointed a member of my personal staff to become the technology compliance coordinator, working alongside Police Administrator, Maggie Goodrich, to conduct random inspections for compliance, not only in South, but also in Central Bureau when we launch in that command as well. And again, let me just emphasize, it won't just be for digital in-car video, but for any and all other technologies that are related, that are similarly related. I've already directed a series of inspections by my office that are related to accountability and designed for the sole purpose to ensure that we are doing the right thing. And I think that's important for the commission to know, and Chief Jacobs mentioned it just a second ago, these are not intentional oversights or missteps. In an organization this size, I think we will always see some migration away from policy, but by the same token, there's 1,650 black and whites in the fleet. Not an excuse. The question is, do we have effective, efficient systems in place to ensure that the right message is being sent and to ensure that everybody is doing the right thing? In addition to what Chief Green mentioned, one of the other things that I intend to do starting immediately is ensure that every single day a field supervisor has the responsibility of ensuring that they contact a unit in the field for the purposes of ensuring compliance, mainly of the antenna in the digital in-car video in the system itself, and also on the body. That's to ensure that during that gap between that 10-hour day, somebody actually has eyes on pieces of that equipment. One of the unintended consequences of digital in-car video, we have found, is that it has caused a fairly sizable number of individuals for the organization to be identified as compliance officers. I believe Chief Green mentioned that he has pulled 10 officers, 10 personnel out of his command for the sole purpose of conducting those inspections. It may seem like a lot of people, it may seem like a fairly significant investment, but I think it's an investment that's wise. I think it's an investment that's timely, and I will ensure that we do the same thing in Central Bureau as we move forward. As I recently did in Southeast 2 weeks ago, it's my intention that as we move forward to meet personally with every area leadership team where digital in-car video will be implemented and firmly established from my chair the department's obligations and expectations as it relates to compliance and the use of those devices. I've already spoken, as a matter of fact, to Chief Perez and OCB to validate that there are appropriate compliance measures already in place for body cams in Central, and I'll carefully review them to make sure that they are. In closing, I would just like to echo once again the remarks that I made in my opening, and also what the Chief made in his opening remarks. This organization is committed. We have a lot invested in community confidence. To the question of whether or not we understand what that means, again, the fact that we have the three of us here today, I think should send a very strong and compelling message of how important this is to us. And you have my personal commitment that we'll do everything we can to make sure that this doesn't happen again.
I just have a couple of specific questions, and I wanted to begin by thanking Chief Beck and Chief Jacobs, Paysinger, and Green for emphasizing the importance of civilian oversight and in bringing the LAPD to where it is today, and then also maybe highlight that, at least as I understand it, and I'm still new on the commission, but the provisions of the consent decree demonstrate best practices of a police department. And so I'm in complete agreement with you that those principles are to be maintained in order to fulfill the integrity of any police department. And in fulfilling our role as civilian commission, I think that ought to continue to be our goal. So thank you. Thanks for, it's very clear to me how strongly you all feel about this issue, and I appreciate the information that you're bringing to us today. So I just have a couple of specific questions. Maybe I'll have more later as we continue to discuss. So the missing antennas occurred in South Bureau, and were they concentrated in a specific division?
Yes, they were. In the way of
If you could have some more
numbers,
information about that, yeah.
once we did the assessment, the majority of those antennas were concentrated in the southeast area.
Okay, and so did that help to narrow the scope of evidence that would need to be investigated in order to did that narrow the scope of evidence available to provide as a source, I'm sorry, to provide a foundation for a fuller, more comprehensive investigation?
It did. It narrowed it from a bureau of 1,700 officers to a single command. The issue is, with over 3 years of not knowing when it started, the cradle port antenna is a very small antenna. It is mounted on the doorpost of the car. You have to reach in to sync a microphone to it. And so, other than to the folks that are sick of those microphones, it is not very visible and no one would look. I was unaware of the antenna until this became an issue. And so over a 3-year period of time, we had no place to start. And we literally had hundreds and hundreds of officers in that command using this equipment over that 3-year period. So it was a tremendous investigation. And when we looked at technology and the types of investigation that we could do, it didn't seem like that there's any way we could single out the officers that were responsible for it.
Okay, I see. So the 3 years of data, the 1,500 officers that Chief Jacobs mentioned, that was all concentrated in Southeast Division.
No, the 1,500 officers are throughout the South Bureau.
It's throughout South
Got
Bureau,
about
right.
350 employees at Southeast, but over a 3-year period, officers coming and going from that command. The documentation, there is no documentation inspections of those antennas, and so we'd have nowhere to start other than trying to correlate people that have worked cars, but those cars roll 24/7 and get assigned to different people every day.
And even though, there was more antennas missing from Southeast, over the course of the 3 years, Southeast officers were in 77, Southeast officers were in Southwest. Could an officer in another division had removed an antenna? Who knows? That's the scope of the investigation. We had that 3 years worth of that where it's very hard to tell where it began. We know where it ended, but we don't know where it began.
I might have some more questions, but maybe if you...
Thank you. I think I'll pursue some of that as well. First, I too want to thank Chief Beck for his strong acknowledgement, statement of support for civilian oversight. I think that is the key issue here, and that's why we're talking about this issue in particular. I want to thank Chief Basinger for upfront acknowledging the department fell short in this instance. That's not where my focus is. I think all of us have a focus of moving forward, but I think acknowledging that was an important first step. That, along with the significance of the recording systems, that this was not an unimportant problem. This was an important problem, and I appreciate your dedication and stated dedication, personal commitment to making sure this is working, and your appreciation of the importance of the accountability piece. This is a strong part of our ability to have accountability in the department so that we are doing the things we need to do. It's also worth remembering, of course, with these recorders, that they help us know what's happening in the other direction. That is, how the officers are being treated, and what's bringing about the actions that they take. And I also appreciate your connecting this to community policing and transparency, because I think that is why this is so important. I also appreciate your putting this in the context of expansion of the recorders into Central and the on-body cameras. And that's another reason why, although this is in one sense a narrow problem, it's a much bigger problem because of where we're going. And finally, I appreciate very much your acknowledgement of the consent decree issue in general here, that the consent decree set a high bar that the department met, but that bar is still there, that you maintain your commitment to meeting the requirements of the consent decree under the supervision of the commission, that those items remain as important today, as you said, remain as important today as before. So a couple things I'd like to follow up on. I guess before I do that, let me just offer my thanks as well to Chief Green and to Chief Jacobs. I appreciate the amount of work that you put into this. I appreciate your devotion to the monitoring of this and the importance of it, and I understand that. I think that your response in emphasizing the importance of it with the officers afterwards was the right thing to do, and I appreciate that. And Chief Jacobs, I appreciate your help each step of the way with this, and I want to talk about the notification issue in a minute, but appreciate your statements about that. So if I come back to Chief Basinger, I guess I'd like to understand a little better. I think I welcome your statement about inspections. We see a lot of audits here. I know there are differences between audits and inspections. It would help me to understand, and I think my fellow commissioners to understand in a little more detail, when you say you're going to be doing inspections of these and other items under the consent that were originally under the consent decree, can you help me understand what that process is and what happens with the result of those? Do those go to the Inspector General? Do they come to us? How would we learn about that?
Thank you, Commissioner Salzman. Just to give you an example, just this past Friday, I ordered an inspection, not an audit, but inspection of all 26 front desks throughout the department. The purpose for doing so was to ensure that we had at the front lobbies the commendation forms, that we had complaint forms available, and also the availability of CCW permit packages. In addition, frankly, to ensure that the state of the front desks themselves were in a clean and well-kept condition, and also to ensure that all of our personnel were properly equipped. Save for one command, I'm very pleased to report that we came out 100% compliance. In other words, each one of those items, let me qualify that, save the CCW permits, we fell a bit shy of the mark there. To the question of what happens after that, that information was immediately reported to me. The inspection occurred Friday. I got the results yesterday, and I intend to present those results to the bureau chiefs today. They will then transmit that information to their subordinate captains and their captains to the lieutenants. The benefit of an inspection is that I'm able to send out members of my team, my personal team, out immediately and have near immediate results. So if there is an issue, if there is a problem, if there needs to be some recalibration or for us to create a new architecture in some area that we have misstepped, we can do so nearly immediately. And that word in operations travels. And so I think it's important in as much as in an audit you get much more detailed drill down information. In an audit, you typically don't get results for 3, 4, sometimes 6 months. In inspection, as was the case this past Friday, I got results from that Monday, and I intend to distribute that information today. And by the way, that was one of the consent decree related items.
And in that process, which sounds great to me, and I appreciate that very much, and I think you're right to focus on a process that will bring about results more quickly than the audits will. One piece still interested in is whether there's any role in that with the Inspector General. Would there ever be notice to the Inspector General based on the findings of that kind of an investigation? Or, so,
In the past, there has not been, but obviously, I'm more than willing to provide that information through the Chief of Staff to the IG. It's not secret information.
Right.
As a matter of fact, everybody, by the time I finished, everybody knows that I've done it.
well, I, for one, I guess I will ask the Inspector General to work with the Chief of Staff on that and see. I don't want to bury them with unnecessary material, and I don't want to overburden you with communications that don't need to be done. And I trust the Inspector General and the Chief of Staff to work out an agreement that, or an arrangement where when, as a result of these inspections, there are problems that the Inspector General is notified. I also encourage you, to the extent, of course, we expect you to bring us the bad news, but when there's good news, I think that's, I welcome hearing that too. So to
Absolutely.
the extent you are getting good news from these inspections, I'm happy to hear that, particularly on an issue as important to this one.
As a matter of fact, I'd be more than willing to provide the matrix to the Inspector General today.
Right.
And Commissioner, if I can just add, if one of the Office of Operations inspections brings up an anomaly or something that we need to look at, then we'll bring it up to IAID, and those, all those inspections, as you well know, come to the commission and through the IG. So, I mean, these are multi-layers. I mean, it really starts at the sergeant level, who checks those cars in and out and looks to see that the antennas are still present every, however many times that car goes in and out every day, which is generally three times, and then works its way up to the divisional inspections, then the bureau inspections, then the Office of Operations inspections, and if it comes to the level where we need to do a bigger piece, then it goes to audit division, and then of course those all come through you, and so there is a system in place, but we're more than willing to work with the Inspector General to see if there's something that they think needs to be brought forward. And there are just a lot of these that go on, is the thing.
I understand
And
that.
I wanted to point out that Chief Paysinger, he skipped over it, but that desk audit was specifically to ensure that our officers were wearing the vest, their bulletproof vests at the desk due to the incident that occurred last week.
If I could just, one more question about the inspections. I'm assuming that one of the things that's going to be inspected going forward, probably relatively quickly, if it isn't already, is this specific issue of these antennas. Speaking hypothetically, you do that inspection 2 weeks from now, and you discover that there continues to be a problem. Can you help me understand what happens at that point?
Sir, if I may.
Explain the process, Bob, because they're doing them daily.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you.
First of all, for the last 4 years, I felt tremendous responsibility and accountability to get this new system online. And it's been a challenge, but I've also received more benefit than anybody else in the city from the public trust component. This is a new system to LAPD, and over the last 4 years, there have been a number of issues that have arisen that we've had to act on because we didn't anticipate. The initial Special Order 45 left some holes that officers could use on things, and that's all been fixed through Bureau orders. And as these issues come up, we identify either with a Bureau order and put systems in place for inspections. And we've identified some other issues that ultimately we're looking at now in the way of tightening up and amending the Bureau order that leaves no room at all for either transmitter antennas or cradle port antennas not to be inspected daily by the officers involved, because ultimately it's their responsibility. Now they're required to make an immediate notification to the supervisor if they break an antenna, even in the field, and as soon as practicable, go back and have that antenna replaced or the transmitter replaced. Supervisors are currently required to make 2 inspections a day and document those on their supervisor's log to ensure that the cradle port antennas and transmitter antennas are in place. Kit rooms are not allowed to assign equipment that's not functional as it goes out into the street. And the Bureau is auditing supervisors' logs now to make sure that those required inspections are done. And so other than going out and inspecting them myself, I'm confident that at this point, the Bureau order has tied up any loose ends. Now, whether or not something else that we failed to anticipate will come up,
Right.
and when it does, we'll act on it immediately. Believe me, I truly understand the benefit of this system. And so we're working as aggressively as we can to close any loopholes.
Can you explain I think I understand it, but I'm not sure I do. You talked about the two different kinds of antennas, transmitter antennas and port,
The cradle port antenna.
port antennas.
Cradle port antenna, I'm sorry,
right,
This is the antenna that actually we talked about that's in the car,
right.
and this is the one that would be on the body.
So that's on the second one, which is the transmitter, I guess, is the,
And this is not the current one. I think they have a current one behind me because it's hinged. I give you
Right.
the size,
yeah,
but it's not the actual antenna that's currently in there. See how we now have a hinged antenna?
right. And that, the officer's wearing that.
That's on their belt.
That's on their
Right.
belt.
And I guess I understand from having looked into this that one of the things you discovered throughout this process, and fairly recently, I guess, was that in addition to the problems with the original problem, there did then seem to be a problem with the transmitter antennas. And I would appreciate if you would just talk about that a little bit and how you've responded to that and the accountability issues there.
I directed an assessment of all the area kit rooms because the cradle port antenna was the big thing that was on the radar initially, and I'm very comfortable that problem has been dealt with. And during that assessment, I identified that there were, again, 45 antennas on transmitters that were gone or broken. 36 of those 45 were already marked bad order. They were off to the side. We currently have an investigation going on to that, and a lot of this focus was at Southeast, and so we have an investigation to investigate all the details of that piece because it's a much shorter time frame. But what we've also identified is now that we're 4.5 years into the system, what I didn't anticipate was serviceability and burn rate on antennas and broken antennas. And so as we look at a brand new receiver, a lot of those that you look at and currently assigned to the field aren't in that condition because they're out 24 hours a day going over fences, being dropped, and those types of things. And so we're currently working with Maggie's shop to look at the tracking of that equipment and the serviceability so that we have a barcode on it when it leaves their shop, comes to command, we can track it when they're sent back for repair, we can track the number of antennas that are used, and we look at burn rate for antennas. So each one of my command has been given additional antennas, and actually Harbor has gone through all of their antennas and ordered more, and that's my smallest command. And it's just because it's a very, very small, fragile piece on a small, fragile hinge. Additionally, we had a significant problem with breakage of those antennas, and the manufacturer redesigned the hinge to help it keep it down underneath this strap. However, with the hinge on it, it makes it even more subject to breakage if it gets hit. And they've got to keep them out on their belt. They can't keep them in their pockets.
Thank you. This may be I'll make a comment, and the response maybe want to come from Chief Basinger or not. I'm looking out at 7 stars. There are 4 more to my right. There are only 3 of us here today, so there are 15, but I sort of set those aside. If I'm counting right, there are 11 stars sworn before us talking about this antenna problem and talking about what now we understand to have been not only a one-time but a 2-time problem in Southeast. And it seems to me, from what I understand about this, that this really is not a 7-star. At the end of the day, this is not a 7-star or an 11-star problem. The solution here is with the sergeants and the lieutenants and the captain. And I'm not trying to get into any of the personnel or personal stuff, but it does seem to me that it warrants attention given the focus in Southeast. And I encourage you to think about that. And if you want to comment about that, that's great. If not, I understand.
Just a brief comment, Commissioner Saltzman. As I mentioned earlier during my comments, that Chief Green and I felt so strongly about the accountability question. Was it last week or week before?
Week before.
Week before last, I tracked to Operation South Bureau personally and joined Chief Green and Commander Scott with both captains, all the lieutenants, all the D3s, and all the Sergeant Twos. And my purpose and intention of that visit was to really encourage them to take a greater role and responsibility. The clarity of their responsibility, at least in my view, was very clear to them. The idea that it was their responsibility to ensure that this system, that this community-based system, would not be compromised. As a matter of fact, before I left, they all got together and they created a ledger in terms of the things that they needed to do to ensure compliance in the future. So, although nothing is fail-safe, the fact that we went down there, had that discussion, it was a really good discussion, at least from my chair. I was very encouraged by the fact that they weighed in very clear terms. It wasn't me talking, it was them talking. And as a matter of fact, it wasn't the chief or the commander or even the two captains. The vast majority of the feedback came from the leadership in that room. And so I think as we move forward, they are very, very clear about what they have to do. And in those very limited circumstances where somebody runs afoul of policy, I can give you my assurance that appropriate action will be taken. As a matter of fact, last week I sat in with the chief during his signing sessions for discipline. And without getting into any specifics, there was one situation where an officer manipulated the digital in-car video, and I suspect that he or she won't be doing that again soon.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
If I could just add, the department is paying very close attention, and I know that the IG is too, so that the commission can be fully informed on the current investigation and to see if it is a wear item or if it's or if there is some malfeasance involved. And so, that will have a significant impact on what steps are taken in that command. And I think that's important to recognize. The other thing is that the department and me as the chief was very deliberate in the selection of South Bureau and Southeast as the birthplace of in-car video. There is I've worked there for many years, as everybody at this table. And we know that the confidence in the community there can often be strained, and it was important to bring this piece of transparency there first. But we also knew it would be a difficult lift because it is a tough command to work and a tough command to manage. So all of that is not lost on us, and we take it very, very seriously.
Thank you. I just have one other area I'd like to explore a little bit, and this is the notice issue that Chief Jacobs referred to and that Chief Beck referred to. I guess what I appreciate what you've said about it, and I accept that. Where I get stuck is, if I understand this right, in July, when the department more broadly became aware of the problem, the decision was made not to open a personnel investigation. If I'm getting this right, please correct me if I'm...
Timeline's a little wrong.
Okay.
It wouldn't have been till August.
Okay, in August. Had the department opened that investigation, my understanding is the Inspector General would have been notified automatically. That happens as a matter of course. And so for me, that's part of why I get hung up on the question about the investigation. I appreciate everything you've said about how difficult it would be to do a sting, to figure out what's happening currently. I also appreciate that it would be difficult to look back, certainly over the full period of time. I'm not a detective, but it seems to me there would be ways to look at some narrow pieces of time over the last several months to get a better reading of what was happening, perhaps see whether there was a way to further an investigation to figure out who was responsible. And I understand the department's decision not to do that, but to me that is where one significant piece of the difficulty comes, is how to square that with your strong statement of of how important this system is and our essentially zero tolerance of messing with the system, how to square that statement with the lack of investigation, which, in my view, is what created the notification problem. So that, I'm
If
happy
I
to
could-
try to understand that
Sure,
better.
and let me speak to the notification. I believe you're right, although I'm not involved in, if a personnel complaint is taken, is the Inspector General notified? I believe there is a system to do that, but I'm not involved in that. I think, I take on the responsibility for the chief of either making notifications or ensuring notifications are made. And I do that either through Mr. T. Fink or Mr. Bustamante. To me, it really doesn't matter if a personnel complaint is taken or not. When I speak to them, I speak about many issues and many things that never become a personnel complaint. I take my responsibility much deeper than that, not because I have to do it, but because that we should do it. So, my failure in this part has nothing to do with a personnel complaint being taken or not. As I said, and I explained to you 3 weeks ago when we met, this is an oversight on my part. There's no intention in this. This was not an act that was done purposely in nature. I think you can talk to Mr. T-Fink and Mr. Bustamante to see the relationship that we've had in the past, and I think we'll continue to have in the future.
I appreciate that very much, and I know that that's true, that there is a good relationship there, and I understand and appreciate that this was inadvertent. The reason I ask about the investigation is because it seems to me that would have kept it from happening.
And as I said again, and I'm being honest.
I'm going to ask the Inspector General, so
Yeah.
you don't have to try to answer.
But I say, it really doesn't matter if we do a personnel complaint. I have a higher responsibility than that to make sure that they're
I
notified.
appreciate that. I'm sort of dominating, so I'm happy to
I just have one follow-up
Please.
question, just regarding the 3 years of data. Could I, perhaps you could just give me some more information so I could help me understand better how that was defined, how that scope was determined, how that,
Maybe you can help me, Bobby. I'll start and then you can help me. When the kit room will have equipment checkout, and there is a log done a few times a day. We have a daily worksheet that shows everybody that works out that's done every day. There's at least 5 to 10 of those a day. 3 years worth of, I just described 10 sheets of paper at least, minimum, and probably much more than that, for one day for one area. We were looking at 4 areas in one division over 3 years worth of data. Producing that much would have been literally thousands and thousands of documents to go through of who was working, who had the cars, how they were assigned, who they were assigned to. Boxes and boxes and boxes. Does that provide a little more? Bobby, do I?
Yeah, that does it, those kit room logs, and with the thousands of documents, you still have to put somebody's hand on that antenna, removing it. That's why we
Yeah.
looked at Sting technology, because my initial assessment was I'd like to get somebody removing that antenna so we could hold them accountable. But ultimately, when we looked at that technology and look at the position of those cradle ports and the size of the antenna, it can be done very nonchalantly in the car. And even if I can put somebody in that car and create a pattern, could we, unless somebody admitted that misconduct, could we actually sustain a complaint or focus it? And so when we looked at the expansive of it, ultimately I knew that I could put orders in place to stop it. But once we determined we didn't have the technology to do any type of sting, with the volume of the investigation, for me personally, I didn't see the potential for an outcome of holding anybody accountable.
Commissioner Rance.
Good morning, and I'm bringing up the rear on this for a variety of reasons, not the least of which my voice is really bad. I still am recovering from that nasty cold thing that went around. But I would like to ask a few questions, and one is, can you just take me again through what the barcode is going to indicate? The barcode is on the body of that transmitter? Is that what I'm understanding?
Currently, each one of these transmitters, and when they get to an area, they're given a barcode, and that's placed in what we refer to the kit system. However, it's an open system, and as these things are broken or the batteries die, they're shuffled between the area and the tactile technology section at a Maggie shop. And the tracking of those, because that barcode is at the areas, doesn't take it back or put into any system that we have department-wide. So again, another thing that we've identified with the new technology is there's got to be a better system in place to track it from the inception when it arrives at the the department to the area for tracking purposes for maintenance and the number of burn rate from the antennas and everything else. We currently don't have that.
Who had it and when?
I'm sorry?
And then who had it and when?
Yeah. And we don't know, currently on the KIT system, if it's scanned out, but the KIT system is also, I found out during this, is an open system that can be accessed by a number of different officers, so it's not a secure system. And so even if I were able to track this, that Bob Green had this antenna night after night after night, I don't know that since the system is not secure, I can't prove that that system hasn't been.
But that barcode is really telling you that Bob Green has the transmitter, not necessarily that Bob Green has the antenna, because the antenna can still be separated from
Correct.
that device, right?
Correct.
So we don't really have a technology that exists that lets us focus on and understand and know what happened to the antennas going forward.
That's correct.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to now revert to the days when I ran a news department. And what used to happen would be the news photographers would come in, and at the beginning of the shift, there's a sheet where they have to go through and run through all of the equipment and make sure that all the equipment is in place and the batteries are charged and the cameras are ready and there are no broken lenses, et cetera. How does that work in the police department so that if an officer comes on to shift and goes to a particular unit and the two antennas that are inside the car or to be inside the car are there, and then there's one that will be on the body along with that transmitter. Are you saying that at the beginning and end of each shift that an officer is attesting to the presence and the functionality of those antennas?
Correct. Right now, they're required to inspect both the cradle port antennas in that black and white and log that at end of watch and beginning of watch. And the only thing I have in place is field inspections by supervisors that the supervisors are all now required to do every day and document those on their log. So that, and we looked at technology, Commissioner, of potentially gluing these on, but that interferes with reception. We looked at a lot of different technology to help us out. But at the end of the day, this can be unscrewed as well as those cradle port antennas.
Right. So when we're saying that on each, that there is a commanding officer who is going through daily, of the 1,000+ black and whites that would be on the street every day, are you saying that every day there is a log of over 1,000 pieces of paper that are being inspected, looked at by a supervisor to say that these are all in place?
A kit room report that comes out from that kit room, and generally that's about 5 times a day for each watch that's deployed in a command. The 2 primary watches and your alternate watches, those come out, those are attached to the watch commander's logs, and those should be reviewed by the watch commander or the assistant watch commander daily as they come in.
Okay, I'm not sure that you answered me, though, because I'm still trying to understand if for every car there is a supervisor looking at the documentation for every car that would indicate that there are 3 antennas present on a daily basis in each car.
That part of it is captured on a daily field activity report that each officer does, and they have to log their inspection saying that they did it, start a watch and end a watch, and that is turned into a supervisor that's inspected at end of watch.
Okay, so it's turned in, it's not necessarily inspected every day, but should a antenna go missing, then that documentation can be recaptured.
Correct, and now there's a requirement, if that antenna goes missing, you have to immediately notify the supervisor. So in fact, if I go back to black and white and I find that there's an antenna missing, the last officer that drove that vehicle will ultimately end up being the recipient of that notice correct for failure to inspect it.
So if that officer who had that black and white did not notify a supervisor at that moment that the antenna, 1, 2, or 3 of them are missing, then the department is able to hold that officer responsible because that officer was supposed to notify the supervisor immediately.
Correct.
Okay. So somewhere in here, there is a system in place where on a daily basis, a human being is responsible for verifying that these devices are in place, and if they are not in place, then a supervisor is notified.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, I just wanted to be sure about that. The other thing, is there some significance to the fact that of all of the antennas that were in place throughout the department, that the losses were concentrated in Southeast? I mean, is there a significance that we are to attach to that?
I can only speculate. Southeast was clearly the area where we had the in-custody death involving Officer O'Callahan, and filed charges on her, and that case was predominantly based on statements that were captured on digital in-car video. And so my speculation is, based on that, it had a significant emotional impact on Southeast. Again, should I have anticipated that? Maybe so, but I didn't. And so until we identified this cradle port antenna issue in July, it wasn't even on my radar. But now that we're trying to anticipate anything else we can that involves digital in-car video.
I'm not, I just want to see if I can understand what you just said, that the in-car death with which Officer O'Callahan was connected might have somehow impacted the missing, I'll use the word missing, the missing antennas. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, ma'am. It may,
So when did that in-car death happen? Do you remember?
a year,
Summer of last year?
a year and a half.
Of 2012?
Yeah.
Okay. So summer of 2012, that would have happened, and that would then, based on what you said, then we could probably assume, which is always dangerous, but we could probably assume that post-August 2012, we would have seen an increase in the loss of the antennas.
Commissioner, I'd just be careful.
Be careful,
Yeah,
right,
be
that's
careful.
why I'm trying to,
It's
Pure speculation.
purely speculation at all.
okay. All right, so I'm going to move away from that one, but I want to get back to, again, the significance of it being concentrated in the Southeast Bureau, and I'm going to take out of the conversation then the whole issue of the in-car death. Let's remove that. Just from the perspective of frequency and odds and statistics, if there is an entire department and then there's a particular bureau or division where we're seeing a greater frequency, then I guess I would conclude, just me, I would conclude that maybe there's something going on there culturally. That's what I would conclude. And if I concluded that maybe something was going on there culturally, then I would probably want to, in a solution mindset, try to figure out how am I going to take whatever kind of action I might need to take in order to look at culture, see whether there needs to be a cultural change, because it doesn't appear to have been widespread throughout the entire department. It seems to be to have been concentrated in an area. And so now my question is, I understand that in the past couple of weeks, you all went and had a very serious and targeted conversation with the command staff and the lieutenants on up and the D3s and all the above. I'm now asking assessment-wise. Are you of a mind that, one, there might have been a cultural issue, and if there wasn't, I'm happy to accept that there wasn't, and two, if there was, what did we do to address what was going on specifically in Southeast?
Commissioner, each of the areas throughout the city is unique in its own way. There are obviously some reasons that led me to go to Southeast to have that discussion. I just want to reiterate my strong belief that the leadership team, the two captains, all the lieutenants, the D3s, and the Sergeant 2s are keenly aware of their responsibilities. To your specific question, I'm frankly at not liberty to say or state publicly some of the personnel issues that Chief Green and I and Chief Jacobs and I have discussed. I'd be more than willing in closed session to discuss those with you, but at this point, it's probably not appropriate.
Right, and I'd be satisfied with that, and I'd say, let me just say from that perspective that I'll use the word pleased to hear what you all have stated today in terms of what it's going to be like going forward and what it has been from the point where this entire issue surfaced. I do want to say that I would be very interested in hearing how any adjustments would have been made in order to fix a situation that could have been going on for some time, and that's what I would refer to as culture. And from the perspective of, needing some greater attention, I'm interested in hearing about the greater attention that will be placed, specifically because I just get concerned when I see it concentrated in a particular locale. And then finally, I just want to say that I appreciate all that we've heard today, appreciate what the follow-up has been, and I want to state that my role and my perspective as a commissioner is that I am seeking, on the behalf of the department and the commission, a greater transparency, that I think that the public in the city deserves a greater transparency as to how the department functions, how decisions are made that relate to public safety, and I know that this department is certainly committed to that. Sometimes maybe we aren't as specific as we need to be around certain issues, and to the extent that there was some oversight and not informing the commission, I think 4 of the 5 of us weren't commissioners at the time. I think that all 5 of us see ourselves, and I think I heard us described as a post-consent decree commission. And when the mayor asked me to consider this role, I sort of took on in my own head, took on the responsibility for myself as, even though the courts, the federal oversight is no longer present, that it's our responsibility to maintain at least that level of oversight. And that, I think, is, in having conversations with the commission, that's where we see our responsibility. We absolutely value our role. We value what the department does. The cooperation and the relationships are very, very important to us. But I would say that I have to emphasize at this point that we take very seriously our role in the oversight process. And so I appreciate your willingness to be as sharing and as open as you have been and are, especially around a topic that is so, I'm going to label it, somewhat controversial and certainly of concern. So, you got more questions?
I just have one comment, a quick one. And I definitely agree with Commissioner Madison. Thanks for making those comments, those final comments. I'm pleased to hear that there's more rigorous investigation taking place based on the last incident. I think that's really terrific because the inability to investigate is probably as troubling as the incident itself, because the ability to investigate serves as a deterrent for these kinds of things happening in the future, I think. And so to the extent that investigation capability can be maximized in the future, that's something that I would certainly support and would like to help facilitate, or anything I can do to help move that along. I think that's an important goal.
Madam President, if it's okay, I would like to turn to the Inspector General with some questions. So before I put the Inspector General on the spot, I do want to thank each one of you, Chief Beck, Chief Basinger, Chief Jacobs, Chief Green, for your candor today, your responses, and your commitment to civilian oversight. I think that's what we're here for, and I appreciate that. So if I might turn to the Inspector General, I just have a few questions for you, starting with the question that Chief Jacobs and I had about when you get notified. So my question, I think, is, had the department opened an investigation in July, August, would you have been notified, or can you help me understand that process?
Sure. To clarify kind of the notifications and what
Please.
happens within the department, sometimes we're notified about things kind of through informal channels, but as Chief Jacobs has indicated, he's generally quite good at communicating with us. We have frequent conversations about things that are going on within the department and have a very, I think, a very strong dialogue on issues that we need to both work together on. So I would say this is more the exception than the norm on that. As far as a complaint being generated, if the complaint was generated, we would be notified about this. I have an excellent relationship, too, with Chief MacArthur, who runs PSB. But I think to Chief Jacobs' point, that he generally gives information regardless of what the administrative requirements might be in trying to give us actionable information and work with us on items. So I would agree with this statement.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that, and I guess absolutely, worth repeating. I appreciate how seriously you take that obligation. I do think, at least from my perspective, one lesson learned here is about, it seems to me, even in an instance where up front you think that you are not likely to be able to find the answer, that the complaint's going to end up unfounded. And we see many complaints that end up unfounded that you have investigated. It seems to me one lesson learned here is, had a complaint been opened at that point, even if you then determined you couldn't go forward with the investigation, Inspector General would have been notified. And I think that would have been a good thing. So that's one comment. Any questions we haven't asked that you think we should have asked today, that things we've left open?
All I can really add, Commissioner, is that Chief Jacobs and myself and the department have, and Chief Green, as soon as we found out about the issue, have made everything available for us to look at and have been very forthcoming in providing the documentation necessary for us to do our analysis. And we've been pretty plugged into the process, including the latest issues with the on-belt transmitters, and my team, which is sitting immediately behind them, that Assistant Inspector General Janko Sibley and Special Investigator Ed Krein have really taken the point on this and have been interfacing with the department to make sure that whatever investigation occurs, that we have meaningful input on that. And I know from my experiences with Chief Jacobs that we will have the input, and we will have some robust conversations on how to move forward on this. So
Great.
I'm confident that given where we are now, that we're able to improve upon things and kind of work together to kind of resolve this.
Good, thank you. And with respect to things we've said or members of the department have said today, anything in particular disagree with, you think warrants some further explanation, we may be misunderstanding?
No, sir. I mean, I think you covered all the relevant issues, and the biggest thing for me going forward is being able to have the relationships and the open dialogue to make sure that I can do a meaningful, robust investigation and provide that to you. And I know that I can with Chief Jacobs and the other chiefs at the table. And I know that my staff is already intimately involved in the investigative process for this latest issue. And as it occurs with us, the IG's office, whenever we do have an issue or whenever we do have a concern, that's when I reach out to you behind the scenes and inform you of those matters so that we can have a meaningful dialogue, and if I can't resolve issues at my level, that you're able to do it at yours. So I think from my perspective, I think there is a meaningful way forward on this.
And then I just have a couple of requests and one more question for Inspector General. As I understand it, on this issue, the antennas, and that as Chief Basinger said, there's a series of investigations going on, Chief Green has said, and so I would request, if it wasn't already on your agenda, to keep us informed, report back to us on that, on this issue in particular, because of the importance of it. Second, I'd like you to look at this overall series of events and consider whether you have recommendations for us about what we might have done or what the department might have done differently. You may conclude that we have beaten this horse to death and there's nothing further to talk about, but you may conclude there's some systemic recommendations you'd like to make, whether the audit procedures have been set up are working, and I request that you do that. I'd like to hear back, even if the report is, there's nothing further to do. And then my final question, I think is to the Inspector General, but it may also be to the Chief or to Mr. Teefank or Mr. Alikan, who I see in the audience. I'd like to be reminded about how we are, as a commission, reviewing the status of each of the items formally under the consent decree that I know you're paying close attention to, that I know the department is auditing. In the past, Mr. Chaliff would be here with some of those, and that's why I refer to Mr. Alikan. And so all of which goes to constitutional policing. So if you can just help me understand how those things are coming to us, how those are being monitored. And as I said, I'm not sure who I'm asking.
Sure, I can address that initially, and I'm sure the department's going to want to chime in as well. One of the things that my office has done over the last couple of years is we've tried to kind of reinvent ourselves once the consent decree had ended, to become a little more nimble and the ability to identify high-risk issues that were covered by the consent decree and items that were not necessarily covered by the consent decree. So the Office of Inspector General is kind of transformed a bit. We have more public reports. We identify more trends and more issues that normally would not see the light of day, but we feel it's important to identify these issues for the Commission and for the public. What we have done is collapse the audit and complaint sections into one section. And when I mean collapse, we've also collapsed the body, so we do not have any kind of lag or any diminished capacity in that sense. But we've also stood up a new role, a new section that is specifically designed to be proactive and hunt for issues within the department so that we can head off potential issues before they become full-blown issues. And that team has already been working and interfacing with the department and doing things kind of in real time. And the importance for us is not only to look at the issues that the consent decree covered, but to be a much more nimble organization in order to identify things that, quite frankly, weren't identified by the consent decree, but still need to be addressed.
Thank you.
Commissioners, as you know, the department has to submit to you an annual audit plan. There was an amendment to that audit plan that came before the commission, I believe, a couple of months back that you approved. That audit plan outlines for 2 years the various audits and inspections that the department will undertake. Those go back to the genesis of the consent decree, and also all of the sections within the consent decree, all 187 paragraphs that had implications on policy were incorporated into the department's policies. So I believe there is that oversight to ensure that those things do not get lost in time based on the audit plan and being incorporated into the policies.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm Arif Ali Khan, the Special Assistant for Constitutional Policing at the LAPD. I would just echo what Inspector General Bustamante, and in particular what Mr. Teefank mentioned, and having been personally involved with the consent decree in terms of the process and the transition out of it when I was with the Mayor's office, I think it's important that we implement those, but one of the projects that I am embarking on with my staff being new to the department is a systematic review of those provisions and ensuring that we are conducting all of the audits of those provisions, but in addition, evaluating the contemporary nature of some of those provisions, because the consent decree, of course, was implemented or designed almost 10 years ago now, or about 9 years ago. So that is one of the sort of long-term projects that my office will be looking at over the next few months.
So if we have any more questions or comments from the commissioners on the antenna issue. Otherwise,
I do not. All my questions have been answered. I appreciate the department's response. Thank you very much.
Madam Vice President, we do have 7 comment cards. The first 3 are Jabril Mohammed, Jamie Garcia, and Jerry Diedrich. Look at this.
Good morning, Commissioners. This is Jabril Mohammed for Bismillah Justice Movement. Chief Beck, Chief Paysinger, Chief Green, Chief Jacobs.
excuse me, could you just, one moment, we're going to wait for Commissioner Saltzman to come back. We don't have a quorum yet, just one moment, please. Rob? I apologize, please proceed. Yeah, it's okay.
Can you start my time?
Yes, please.
2 minutes?
2 minutes.
It's,
Starting
okay,
now.
thank you. This is Jabril Mohammed for Bismillah Justice Movement, and my heart goes out. Our condolences to Mr. Cortijo. The point is this, the antennas. You're telling me that in Southeast, how many cars do we have in Southeast? Okay? You're saying 45 antennas over a period of 3 years was missing from the cars. Okay? And this is the culture as a result of someone being killed in the car. Okay? So now we know how important. Oh, another point. How many times have the commissioners ever seen video surveillance from the car? Do they know what that is? Have we seen any footage? Can we get a demonstration so that we'll know what we're dealing with? Now, the importance of video surveillance. We know Rodney King's scenario, okay? That was video. But now the recent scenario was the scenario where the chief showed favoritism in regards to a matter, and we had it on tape. We had everything. Okay, what does this do? What does it matter? Okay, now we have a scenario where we're not using it. Okay, I say to his, you check it in, you check it out. When you get out of the car, your duty is over. You turn in your antenna. The next guy come on, he gets the antenna. That we know who's got the antennas, because you're telling me without antennas there's no surveillance. So now without surveillance there's no record. Without record it's obstruction, objections. We're dealing with 3 years of this conduct. We got to deal with this. It's malignant, okay? So now, where are we in all of this? Targeting, selective law enforcement. I mean, and prove me wrong. I don't want to be indicting. You gave me the information. That was a very honest report, okay? And, justice, justice, justice.
Hi, my name is Jamie Garcia, and I'm a part of the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. First of all, I would just want to point out that I think it's really disrespectful that all the officers left once the community was able to speak. So I know that took 10 seconds of my time, but maybe that'll be given back to me because I just wanted to make a point of that. So we know there's a very large surveillance apparatus put in place to criminalize racially, ethnically, religiously profile poor communities, people of color, and mostly individuals of African descent. Special Order 1 is all about communities being watched and our information being shared regionally, statewide, and nationally. Investigations are being opened on thousands of people. All this hypervigilant spying on our community members is because we are engaging in innocent everyday activities, photography, videography, drawing in public. Yet you have no desire or urgency to investigate your own officers' malfeasance. In fact, Suspicious Activity Reporting Program received flying colors from the Inspector General in March of 2013. How is it then that LAPD cannot watch themselves? What is really going on here? You can engage in an expansive surveillance apparatus, but you can't watch yourself. This is not an oversight, but a continued violation of LAPD on the civil rights of our communities and a point-blank lack of concern or value of the lifting of the consent decree. Who watches the watchers? Who values our human lives? Individuals in LAPD need to be held accountable, fired, or better yet, have a dignified resignation. The Police Commission must act on the behalf of the community and our safety and not protect LAPD's failures.
Jerry Diedrich.
Hello, my name is Jerry Dietrich, and I agree with one thing that Jamie said. We both remarked about how everybody got up and left. It's like, okay, we're going to talk now, so you can leave. That's very frustrating to me, because I feel that this commission is representative of the humans, the people in there, not the uniformed officers. They're represented by Chief Beck. And so it just, in order to have both sides heard, I think they should all remain. But this whole thing is just amazing to me, because I may be a layman or whatever I am, and I don't know anything about these video things, but if I spent thousands of dollars putting these video things in the car, I would look at the video. That's all you had to do. Look at the video once, twice, 7 times, whatever, and say, oh my God, they're not working. But nobody has done that. And just all of a sudden, like 3 years later, they find, oh, goodness, they must be missing something. I just don't understand that. I can't understand it, because all the money that is spent is, you think about the money and how much we should spend and how we should do it, and you really find the best, and I understand that. It's wonderful and perfect, and I like the fact that the commission watches them, but then nobody goes from there. And I fear that from here, nobody will go anywhere. Like you all say, oh, it's a horrible thing, and I really don't want it to happen again, and it'll never, Chief Beck, you said it'll never happen again. From now on, it's on me, it's not going to happen. I don't believe that. Because, who's to say that 6 years from now you might come back and say, wow, we've had a similar thing happen, but it wasn't exactly the same thing. So I just don't understand. I'm just totally flabbergasted. And I represent the people in the community.
The next 4 speakers are General Dogan, Hamid Khan, Pete White, and Ted Hayes.
General Dogon, Skid Row resident. I was here several weeks ago when the LAPD officer was giving an updated report on the body cameras and the car systems. In short, he reported that everything was just great. How the body cameras calm the officer down and the person that's being stopped. That it act like a check and balance, right? You all heard it. He said it right here. But you know what? He had well-known knowledge of all this antenna and everything stuff, this tampering was going on, and he said nothing, right? He basically just sat here and just lied to everybody, just like they lying today, right? Because the cameras tell the truth, right? If you're righteous, the camera going to show you righteous. But if you foul, the camera going to show you foul. And Beck, your officers intentionally bootleg those cameras because they out there getting down foul. What I call cripping. And what I mean cripping, I mean cowards running in pack. And by the incident that happened the other day, them beating, shooting, and tasing this 78-year-old man is proof of this. This is what happened when we don't have no cameras in the car. This is what happened, and you get to get away with when the antennas get broke all on the car. And I just wanted to say in closing that I hear you commissioners talking about you taking this seriously and the chief taking this seriously, this situation about accountability to the citizens. But since all you commissioners came commissioners, we ain't seen nothing. And since you became the IG, we have seen nothing. What we have seen was Chief Beck continue to run around here like a cowboy doing what he want to do. And the officers have been doing what they want to do. But you know what? Y'all got to show us something or y'all got to go.
Good morning, Hamid Khan with the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. So May 16th, 2013 is this headline saying federal judge lifts LAPD consent decree. Goes on to say the order ends oversight imposed in 2001, mostly over the Rampart scandal and on several issues, including evidence tampering and perjury. So let's look at this really quickly, that the installation of in-car video cameras and voice monitoring equipment did not happen from the benevolence of the department. It was imposed. It was imposed as one of the last requirements by federal oversight and a consent decree. And the reason why that was imposed was, and I just want to see that and I'm reading again, that LAPD was overseen by outsiders, its decisions second-guessed by judges and monitors because it couldn't be trusted to govern itself. In essence, dysfunctionality, corruption, and incompetence. So now the question is that, according to the reports, that the chief knew about this in last summer. So, in essence, it had been happening while the consent decree was still there. It was alive and well. It was lifted finally, in May or whatever the date was. So this whole practice of tampering and intentional tampering, and it's not just tampering, it's an intentional sabotage of an equipment, was immediately in violation of the consent decree. So what are you going to do about that? And then, secondly, as this department under his leadership is doing this song and dance about body cameras, he knew about it. Why wasn't this thing first investigated before the body cameras went on? So we're adding additional equipment to monitor people while the equipment that we have is being sabotaged and intentionally, people are being lied to. So the question is, it's not just a moment in time, it's a continuation of that history. We've heard Daryl Gates make his commitment. We've heard Bratton make the commitment. We've heard Chief Beck make this commitment. It's not about appreciation. It's about public knowledge. So we demand there needs to be a public hearing in this thing, open public hearing, not just back doors, and we demand that you, as representatives of the people, write a letter to people who are monitoring the Federal Oversight Committee that this was a violation of the consent decree. Thank you.
Pete White, LA CAN. So clearly an animus exists between LA CAN and LAPD and others who on a daily basis monitor your activities. Actually, I believe this conflict should not exist. I think it's a conflict on your part. It's clear that community policing that we continue to uplift in this room rhetorically at best is aspirational and solely rests within these walls. This is clearly not the sentiment of officers and their leadership in poor communities. Their models of policing harkens back to elements of the Parker and Gates era, and they willfully and knowingly defy public trust, as evidenced by the incidents that we're discussing today. Our effort should be viewed as an early warning system. While you might not like the messengers, the message is authentic. The message is clear. We are the individuals on the receiving end of these transgressions. To be clear, these events continue to highlight systemic deficiencies, such as deficiency internal policies, failed accountability, inadequate training and supervision, ineffective systems of investigation, and lack of sufficient civilian oversight. And the actions are not an aberration, but demonstrates ongoing obstruction, tampering of evidence, patterns and practices that elucidates a dysfunctional system. As heard today, a decision was not made to investigate the serious issue, not to present the information to this body and the general public, to knowingly attempt to hide and cover up this egregious transgression. A decision was made to do that. I urge a public investigation. We can figure out, was it July or August that these things started to happen? But that a public investigation and a public airing of those findings happen immediately. Thank you.
Every MTA bus has a camera on the windshield that faces out forward and into the interior of the bus. The bus drivers don't like that because they say the camera is a spy equipment. Because what's happening, they have determined that bus drivers are running red lights because of the face-forward camera shows the lights red when the bus driver takes off. Now, they're not supposed to do that, but they do it nevertheless. I would imagine that police officers think they're being spied upon. They got body cameras and they got car cameras that are being spied upon. No one likes being spied upon. This notion about if you're not guilty of anything, what do we got to hide? Well, that's ridiculous, because privacy is something everybody cherishes, I guess. So what does the rank and file think about these cameras? Why don't you ever hear from the union about the cameras and what officers feel about being spied upon? That's very important, because you could understand then whether there's a groundswell of opposition and whether there might be some intention to repel it by breaking antennas. Now, I don't know how often these inspections about the antennas take place. Only when there's an incident and someone complains? Is that when you're looking to find out whether or not something's been captured by the antenna? when do you look at the so-called evidence or lack of evidence? That's what I'd like to know. But more importantly, if the union will come forward and articulate the feelings, the responsibility of the rank and file, that would be very interesting. And also maybe indicate what's happening to the antennas. Now, are the antennas screw in or they break off easily? Are they things that can be easily broken? We don't know. But anyway, I'd like to hear from the police rank and file about the antennas.
Thank you. That is our final comment card on that item. We are now on item number 9, public comment. We have 3 public comment cards. We have Sarkis Agajanian, Jabril Mohammed, and Tut Hayes.
Sarkis Agajanian, Hare Krishna. Last week, checking in here, I had a real smart-ass, one of your smart-ass officers. No one likes a smart-ass officer. You have to remind these people that they're public employees, not a Praetorian guard, passe Rome. Now, he's in this room, but I'm not going to identify him because I'm not a coward. Take care of it, Chief. Now, you can talk all you want, till hell freezes over. But in political science, which I love so much, that's why I'm a communist, there's known as the deep state. It doesn't matter who's elected. It doesn't matter who your commissioners are. The boys downstairs do whatever the hell they please. It's only when they get caught, it's a problem. You can rob as many banks as you want. It's only when you get caught that it becomes a problem. Now, I'm sorry next week you won't be here because it's going to be my first anniversary of being severely beaten by someone, and West LA covered it up. Now, West LA's forgotten about it, but I do know there's a detective or some rascal in there that knows what he did. I'm not going to forget. Last year, I didn't have a printer, but my attorney has allowed me to put my printer inside his office so I can print, and you will see what the results are. Last year, I did not contact the media. You will see what happens when I do, because you guys are a bunch of fakes, frauds, and phonies. Take care of West LA, Chief. There's corruption, incompetence, and cover-ups going there. You will suffer for it. Thank you.
Jabril Mohammed.
Morning again, Commissioners, Chief. Bismillah, the Justice Movement would like to impart this information. It goes as follows. O ye who believe, stand out firmly for justice as witness to Allah, even as against yourselves, or your parents, or your kin, and whether it be against rich or poor. For Allah can best protect both. Follow not the lust of your hearts, lest ye swerve. And if ye distort justice or decline to do justice, verily Allah is well acquainted with all that ye do. Now this is speaking in terms of how we tend to favor and how our hearts tend to waver when people that we know are involved in perpetrating dastardly deeds. Favoritism is something that we cannot afford. Okay. Any of us labeled with such, there is a desperate need to vindicate by way of investigation or find guilty those people who are given this allegation. Serious matters are before the city. And as we have stated prior, we reflect the state and the country So let us look into this matter of favoritism, and let us stand firmly for justice, as was thus just quoted. Thank you so much.
Ted Hayes.
Police Chief Darrell Gates says there's no such thing as a less than lethal weapon in the hands of a police officer. I concur. Ruben Salazar was killed by a tear gas canister fired by a sheriff deputy into a bar. He's a reporter. And random fire, bombardment, took place in Santa Barbara with tear gas and projectiles, rubber bullets. They can be lethal. A LAPD officer tossed a flashbang into an apartment. A woman was asleep underneath the window in her bed. She was killed by that flashbang. So I want the commission to not only do oversight, which is not the only thing your job is, policy. Policy is what you set. You decide some of the things and design some of the things this department does. You don't just watch what they do and comment on what they do. You can determine what they do. That's called policy. Found that out when I got a letter indicating that 851.5 of the Penal Code was not being observed because of policy and administration, although it's a misdemeanor not to observe that particular section. So when Darrell Gates says that black people are not normal because they were dying with the chokehold, if you're being chokehold, that's excessive force. Now, you can't resist arrest, but you can resist excessive force. And when we're shot with tear gas canisters and with bullets, rubber, or whatever, randomly, that's excessive force. You have a duty and an obligation for yourself and all the other people who have no idea why a alert was called, unlawful assembly was called, why they're being shot and killed and maimed.
Thank you. That is the last comment card. We are now on item number 10, closed session. The Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss item numbers 10A and B in accordance with Government Code 54957.